You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Brian Freeman is a New York Times bestselling author known for his riveting psychological thrillers and his work in the legendary Jason Bourne series. His novels, including the Jonathan Stride series, masterfully blends action, emotion, and suspense to captivate readers worldwide. His latest installment, Robert Ludlum's The Bourne Vendetta, promises high-stakes intrigue and heart-pounding twists that will leave fans on the edge of their seats. Will Florenza uncover information regarding upcoming projects? Stay tuned to find out. Put your hands together to welcome the fascinating and extremely talented Brian Freeman to the show. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining me for this episode of On the Air with Florenza, which is officially our second interview. And as I said before we came on the air, the first interview, I was fangirling so badly. You know what? I was speaking in a whole 3 octaves higher than my natural voice. So I blew some bubbles to kind of bring down some of that enthusiasm. But also, I got the aid of something else. But before we get started, we're going to toast to a successful show. And I know that you have a fancy mug.
Oh, yes. Here we go.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have, tell me what's going on with your mug.
That's an official CIA mug. I had the great honor of being invited to be part of a writers panel at CIA headquarters last month, and a lot of fun. I was the only outsider. The other two writers there were CIA insiders who'd been in the agencies. So they invited the Jason Bourne guy to be part of it as well, which meant I got a chance to visit the CIA swag shop, which not very many people get to do. So that was a lot of fun.
What? And I am toasting to, I know, I've got a margarita. We're starting our day
I
righteous. So
I think
cheers.
so. Cheers. Yes.
Mm-mm-mm. We have so much to talk about. We have a new book.
Yes, indeed.
Woo-hoo! And it looks like there are 2 new books behind you, but we're going to talk about first the newest. And I have to say, I am loving this fuchsia, purple, kind of an orange undertone
Yeah, isn't
colors.
that cool? Yeah, Putnam has done such a great job with the Bourne covers. I love them all. And my next Bourne is already done. The Bourne Escape comes out in July, and the cover is even better. It's just
What?
fantastic. So
Well, we're going to
yeah,
have you back on for that one. So tell
exactly.
us, how much input do you have on the cover, or is it to the point to where they are so spot on, you just are like, you know what, run with it?
Usually they run the cover by me and kind of ask how does this look? This look okay? Any changes you want to make? And normally it's little things. I think with the original cover of Vendetta, they had based a couple of the background images on some things in an early kind of speculative look at what the book was going to be about. And I ultimately said, let's not go that way because the book really evolved in some different directions. So they tweaked things around with the cover. But I've just loved the theme they've taken with the Bourne books, and so I think they've just done an amazing job. And yeah, the purplish cover, that's a new one for Bourne Vendetta, but it's just really it really just kind of pulls you right into the story.
It really does. I love it. I love it. I love it. So tell us what we are to expect from Jason Bourne and the whole um, dynamics of the story in Born Vendetta.
Yeah, well, whenever I'm plotting out a new Bourne novel, there's a couple of factors that I'm keeping in mind. One is that I want to be very true to Ludlum's original character from the Bourne Identity, and taking that character and having him in an all modern setting with all new plots around him and all new sub characters around him. So a reboot of the series, but doing it in a way that really honors the character that Ludlum created. The other part of that is coming up with very topical, kind of ripped from the headlines plots, and because Ludlum's plots emerged out of that environment of Watergate and Vietnam and a lot of government conspiracies and things, and I feel like we're in great shape to be able to have Bourne in the modern era, because so much of what's going on now feels like it has echoes of where the country was in the 1970s. So I think you'll find that in the Bourne Vendetta, the whole thing revolves around a hunt for a hacked database that can be run via this artificial intelligence engine that can extrapolate from the hacked database and kind of see trends in the database that humans otherwise wouldn't, and that exposes even more secrets than the database themselves. So when you see the headlines that are going on with Chinese hackers getting into various databases, it feels very topical, almost to the point of it's getting a little bit creepy, because last summer the Bourne Shadow came out, and it involved elections in France and an almost presidential assassination. And I was watching the headlines last summer going, was somebody reading my book? Well, this time in Bourne Vendetta, what's a big part of the theme of the book? It's the aftermath of a huge California fire. So
Brian,
I don't know. I'm getting a little nervous here. So
we had the conversation in our last interview about what happens when you start putting things in print, and your friends come and say, "Okay, my friend, either give us the lottery number, the horse that's going to win, or we are going to turn you in for having a crystal ball."
I know. I'm a little nervous. Yeah.
What does that really truly feel like when, in your fictional creative brain, you are creating these plots, these situations, and really, truthfully, lo and behold, you see it on national news?
Yeah, people will sometimes ask that at book clubs. They'll, particularly when it comes to murder mysteries and things, they'll ask, well, aren't you worried that somebody's going to kind of get inspired by the plots that you write and do something terrible? And that's always kind of in the back of your head, and there's certainly been instances where things have happened like that. A couple of Tom Clancy's books, there were terrorist attacks that seemed kind of ripped right out of a Tom Clancy book. And the reality is you can't think that way. I mean, if I can come up with some terrible thing to do, then certainly people with even darker minds than me can come up with them too. So
so it's kind of like a reverse, whereas some authors are writing based on that, books that are ripped from today's headlines. You're writing books that life is ripping from your headlines.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a plot to be written there too. So
ooh, what a great plot that would be. Okay, now remember where you heard that. If your fans were to spend a day with you, what surprising or unexpected thing, or things plural, might they learn about Brian?
I think they would be bored to tears. That's it's funny because I mean, and I know that there are authors. I think about someone like Clive Cussler, and Cussler always amazed me because his real life was so much like Dirk Pitt's. I mean, he would get involved in all these deep sea dives and all this other adventurous stuff, and I was like, oh my God, that's so impressive. I mean, most of us, I feel like, as writers, we're living vicariously,
through the pen.
Yeah, exactly. I can remember years ago, I saw an interview with Danielle Steele, and she was living in San Francisco, and somebody was asking her because there was some big mountain climbing scene in her latest book, and they were like, well, have you ever been mountain climbing on these peaks? And so, like, oh my goodness, no, why would I do something like that? That's why I write about them. So I for me, the people who were kind of spying on me in the writing process, I think would go somewhere else for their entertainment pretty darn fast, because mostly it involves me kind of sitting in a chair with my notepad writing things down. I'm right now in the middle of plotting out my eighth Bourne novel. And so
Uh-huh.
I spent the whole morning sitting on a little chair out on the lanai with my notepad, just writing stuff down and drinking coffee. So
Nice. From
that's
your CIA mug.
exactly. That's about as exciting as it gets around here, I'm afraid.
Well, you know what? That's to be expected because all the excitement is between the covers, book
Exactly right.
covers, book covers.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
So, what hidden talent or skill do you have that people wouldn't associate with a thriller writer?
Well, let's see. I think I'm a pretty darn good baker.
Ooh,
Yeah.
what's your
So
favorite?
honestly, I think my favorite is red velvet cake. That I do a pretty mean red velvet cake, and my wife would say it's the bread pudding with bourbon brown sugar sauce. That's her personal favorite. That's got to be every Thanksgiving. It's got to be bread pudding with bourbon brown sugar sauce. So
I will be in Florida twice in the next 3 months.
there
I'm going to have to
there
inbox
you
you for
go.
some bread pudding.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What I like about baking is that it's one of the few activities where I can literally put the books aside because you have
Yes.
to focus on what you're doing, because if
Yeah.
you don't, you screw it up.
Yeah.
So it forces me to kind of get involved and obsessed with something else other than the books. The other thing that it is kind of just sort of a weird little skill. My reaction time is oddly fast, such that I would say 9 times out of 10, if I drop something, I can actually grab it before it hits the ground. So
Oh,
weird.
nice
So
skill to have. Very nice skill to have. Now, is your wife someone that drops things often? Like, did you need to come to the relationship with that skill? Or
no, only on my head. That's
good to know. Good to know. If you could revisit one place from your childhood that holds a special meaning to you, where would it be and why?
yeah, that's I actually have been back a couple of times to the place that fits that description. When I grew up in Chicago, that was where I first spent my first 10 years. And when we were living there, my mom had inherited this little kind of rundown cottage a few miles from Lake Michigan. And that
Uh-huh.
was where we spent all of our vacations, our summer weekends, everything like that. And I had the opportunity to go back there a few years ago. I was actually doing some events in Michigan, and so I stopped in at the cottage. And my parents were still alive at that point, and I actually called them from the cottage, and they said, "Gosh, we knew you were going to go there. We were wondering how much of it did you remember, because I was so young when we were
Uh-huh.
visiting there." And I said, it's funny because I was calling to tell you that I feel as if every element of who I am and every element of my books comes from the cottage. That
Oh,
what I write today and the themes I pursue all started right there at the cottage. And it was as if time had stood still. Not necessarily a good thing with a cottage
right,
from
right.
the 1970s, but the roads were still unpaved. It was all still dirt roads. The cottage looked as if it hadn't changed in some 50 years. But I can still remember taking walks as a little kid with my dad beside the cornfields and these old abandoned houses and things. And I was, even back then, imagining stories behind the
Uh-huh.
scenes of
Uh-huh.
what was going
Uh-huh.
on. And I mean, when you look at decades later, you look at a book like The Deep Deep Snow or the Ursulina, and it emerges out of that little kid wandering the dirt roads from the cottage. So that's really where I feel like I took shape as a writer.
Wow, that is phenomenal. Did you or your parents recognize at that time where your path would go? Like, were you that creative child, that inquisitive child that was absorbing all of these details that one day would you would regurgitate on a page?
Yeah, I was a huge reader as a kid. I mean, I can remember when we were going up to Michigan for a couple of weeks. I'd check out like a dozen books from the
Yeah,
library and bring them along. And I'm trying to remember if in Chicago I already knew that I wanted to be a writer. I'm not sure. The next year we moved to California, and in sixth grade, I can remember sitting in sixth grade class starting in on a mystery novel. So
nice.
that was really the first sort of ambitious writing I started to do. And so I think moving from Chicago to California was a really tough move for me as a kid. And I think
Yeah,
that was where writing was my way of kind of dealing with, what
those
was going on.
emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, having that safe space. Excellent. Is there a quirky or unexpected item on your desk or in your writing space that has a unique story behind it?
Well, let's see. Well, I am at my desk right now. Let's see. Well, there's actually quite a number of quirky things here. I can show you a few of them. Let's see. We have an unusual little crystal
Oh,
pyramid.
crystal
Yeah,
pyramid. Okay.
yeah. We have a small Coach medicine ball, which is amazingly heavy. This is
Yes.
kind of
Okay.
like small version of a medicine ball.
In a
Uh,
in a baseball shape.
in a baseball shape.
Now, did it
Exactly.
start
Yes.
out white? Because it's kind of got that little tan glow to it. Did
No,
it
it
start
was
out?
always tan,
Okay.
always tan.
Because I'm
So,
like, oh, that
and
thing is well
then,
loved.
well, I sit here, just tossing it up in the air as I'm thinking. So that's, and it's heavy. I could knock somebody out with this thing.
Uh-huh.
So, and this has some interesting history behind it.
Okay, the
Um,
believe sign.
yes, because in the cottage that in Duluth, where I set many of my Jonathan Stride novels, that when I was working on my third Jonathan Stride novel, Stalked, I knew it was going to be this intense winter book, and so I said to Marcia, you know what I think we should do is um, find a little cottage to rent up in Duluth and spend all of January there, so that I
Uh-huh.
can really get the feeling for a Duluth winter. Um, she did not greet that suggestion with quite the enthusiasm, perhaps, that I made it.
That
But
you thought.
nonetheless, that was what I did. That was what we did. We spent all of January in this little cottage out on Park Point in Duluth, 1870s, 1880s era cottage. The floors kind of slanted, and I liked it so much that I made that Strides home in the series. And we went back and we stayed at that cottage many times over the years, and it's become really an integral part of the Stride series. And it was a rental cottage, and so a lot of book clubs would go up there and stay at the cottage so they could kind of read Stride's books and be where Stride lived. Although when you look at some of the terrible things that have happened inside that cottage, you kind of wonder, do you really want to be spending your vacation there? But that's another story. Um,
Now, did she
so
think you had some ulterior motives?
yeah, yeah, you kind of want, you're always listening. What's going on up in the attic up there? So, but on the wall above the fireplace was a piece of art that said "Believe,"
Uh-huh.
and I always loved that. So Marcia got this for me so that I could have a little reminder of the cottage wherever we went. So
Oh.
I've had that ever since. But what was really special was that before we moved to Florida, the owners of the cottage actually sold it back into private hands, and so I asked, could I have the actual Believe poster and the artwork from the wall?
Uh-huh.
Oh, absolutely. So we actually have that with us down in Florida. So I have the actual Believe sign that was in Stride's cottage.
Nice, nice. And I bet they're saying, wait a minute, hold up. We didn't really want to sell it to you. We didn't realize who you were and what you're doing. Darn it. Is there a specific scene or moment in the Born Vendetta that you're particularly proud of and why?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, for me, it my I write in very scene specific ways. I mean, I'm thinking through scenes and blocking them out, kind of the way someone in the theaters of the movie would, in terms of how the action is all going to fit together. And there's one scene, I won't say much about it, of course, because I don't want to give too much away. But
Yeah, they need to
there's
buy the book.
exactly, there we go. But there's a scene where Bourne essentially has to sort of um, turn his back on his Treadstone people, and because he needs to rescue someone, and so the scene in which that rescue takes place. That's one of my favorite scenes in the Bourne series. So.
Nice. Speaking of, when you're writing these really high octane scenes, right? Do
Mhm.
you find yourself mimicking the actions? Are you like, or does your heart rate start pumping when it's like a lot of action, or what's going on with that?
I know it's going well when I start typing faster, where I just kind of keep pounding on those keys so that
Now, does your pulse increase when you're done and you find yourself perspiring and you're thirsty and like,
hey,
wait a minute.
I live in Florida. I'm always perspiring and thirsty. So
What's next for you? I know that the next book will be out in July for the Born series, but what's going on in Brian Freeman's other writing
yep.
world that we should expect? And just give us a tidbit about what's going on with those projects.
Sure. Well, two things actually. My most recent book before The Born Vendetta was Break Every Rule. That came
Uh-huh.
out in September. That was my 30th published novel, so that was a
Wow.
big moment for me. Break Every Rule was the first book I wrote entirely in Florida, and it is the hero Tommy Miller. Is one of my favorite characters, and he kind of combines sort of the best qualities of my detective hero Jonathan Stride and Jason Bourne. So it's very much an action thriller like the Bourne novels. It's very fast paced and compelling, but it's also a really emotional story because Tommy's wife has been kidnapped, and as he's trying
Mm.
to get her back, he realizes that they've both been keeping secrets from each other, and they've been trying to protect each other by keeping their secrets. And he realizes that instead of protecting each other, they've actually left themselves open to this terrible risk because they weren't being honest with each other. And so it's kind of a story of redemption as Tommy tries to get past that secrecy in his life. So Break Every Rule, I've gotten tremendous feedback on that. I love that. That's out right now. And then this fall, September or October, I've got a new psychological mystery called Photograph that will be out, and
Ooh.
it's a really I love the story, and it's told in a female first person narrative like the Deep Snow and the Ursulina, and it's the heroine has a great funny, ironic kind of, narrative style, but also a lot of depth and emotion to her as a character. And this mystery is when I think about mysteries, what I am always looking for is a mystery that feels deliciously complex,
Yeah.
but when you realize what's really going on, it's actually bracingly simple.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
look back on a book like Michael Connelly's Bloodwork, which is one of my favorite works by
Good
Connelly,
book.
and that's a story where again there's so much going on that feels like there has to be some crazy complex connection, and in fact the connection is very very simple and yet it still shocks the pants off you when you read it. That's
Yeah.
I think the way Photograph comes together is there's a great twist out there that hopefully people aren't going to see coming, but that once they realize it, everything makes
Falls in
sense.
place.
So, yeah,
And
yeah.
just the word photograph, like when you were saying that, I could just, and I have not seen the cover of that book, but do you
Well,
have that one?
I was just gonna say
I just want to see if
we
I
just
felt
wrapped up
right.
we just wrapped up the cover last week. So let me see if I can show it to you here.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
She's
I'm
kind of
all
got that Gwyneth Paltrow, pouty lips, blue eyes.
but it's
Ooh,
one green eye and one
and
blue
one
eye.
blue. That David Bowie look
Yeah,
going.
yeah, and you can't necessarily see the tagline. It's deliberately a little soft under there, but underneath Photograph it says "Eyes don't lie."
Eyes don't lie. Well, listen, we're gonna have to do something just about Photograph
I think
because
so.
now is it in pre-sale? So where are we with
Not
Photograph?
quite yet. We're still working through. I mean, we finished off the cover. We're literally still working through the copy edits. I expect that should be done in the next few weeks. So
Okay.
I would think by spring, then it'll be out there for pre-orders. So.
Okay, I will make sure that we push that one. Talk to me briefly about what your process is, or if there's anything that you have to do proximity wise or to get into the minds of such distinct, different characters? Like, is there something physically that you do so that you know, okay, Brian, this is what we're working on. This is what we're working on. We're not working on this.
Yeah, that's a good question because there have been times where I've had to work on two books at the same time. I much prefer writing the books successively, but deadlines sometimes are such that I have to kind of go back and forth a little bit. That was true. I know when I was working on my very first Bourne novel and one of my Jonathan Stride novels. I think the deadlines were within 2 weeks of each other. So for 6 months, it was a week on Bourne and a week on Stride, and you had to get into two very different mindsets so that they didn't bleed over on each other.
Right.
Same thing happened last year. I was working on the Bourne Escape, which is the one that comes out in July. At the same time, I was dealing with Photograph, and so I'd probably spend a month on Photograph and then switch over to Bourne and then go back to Photograph. So the good thing is, because I think the characters are so different, there's not that much opportunity to feel like they're bleeding over on each other. And for me, I always say that I don't see myself as writing the characters. I see myself as more of a
conduit.
I'm channeling the characters. I want the characters to talk through me directly to the readers. I don't want to get between the readers and the character, the readers and the story. I just want to be the one kind of writing this all down. And as a result, I'm trying to put the characters in charge. And I think in doing that, it means that they have more of an opportunity to really shape the book. And there's less chance for me to sort of feel like I'm trying to impose, put a square peg in a round hole. Because I've talked to writers that are like, well, if a character starts trying to take it in a different direction from what my plan is, like, no, I'm going to steer it back. I'm like, well, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do, but for me, I always feel like, well, you know what, the characters know something I don't, and I'd rather see where they want to take me, because I feel like they're the ones that really should be in charge of the story.
Absolutely. Do you find yourself, especially with having month on, month off, month on, month off, or weeks on, weeks off, that the characters get antsy, or that they kind of get disrespectful in your head and they're like, no, boo, this is our time? Like, I kind of see my husband's new guilty pleasure is Sister Wives.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we always discuss like how this dude is going from house to house to house. Like, I'm at an age, I will say, bring me on a sister wife, because I'm tired of doing it all by myself. Go somewhere else, buddy. I don't even mind. Do you find that the characters are jealous that someone else has your mental space?
I think it's more that I'm not sure if they're jealous, but they become a little standoffish. Because when you get out of the headspace of those characters for a few days or a few weeks, it's not like you can just jump back in. I mean,
Right.
you have to
Massage them.
Yeah, and invite them back in, and it's like I was talking about in terms of a trust relationship with a first person narrator. You're building a trust relationship with that person, that they've got to trust you to tell their story. So when you've been away from those characters for a while, it takes a little bit of time for them to kind of open up again, and sort of for that to all flow. And so what I find is that I end up I end up rereading and editing a lot of the chapters I've done before, which kind of pulls me into the ethos of the characters, and then hopefully the river just keeps flowing from the old chapters into the new chapters, and we go from there. So
yeah, a lot of creative foreplay in here. I'm just going to have to make this a 18 and above, but they expect sushi, flowers, and chocolate when you've been gone.
Yeah, there we go.
Where are the listeners able to connect with you and just come from that side of being a follower to a fan?
Yeah, well, they can find me kind of anywhere. I'm on the web at bfreemanbooks.com. That's all one word, bfreemanbooks.com. So they'll find all the books out there, plus a page that has a list of all of my different series and standalones in reading order, so they can kind of get the whole picture of all 31 books now that are out there. And then I'm all over social media as well. I'm on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days at B Freeman Books. Same with Instagram, and then over on Facebook at B Freeman Books and B Freeman Fans. So if you start typing B Freeman, sooner or later you're likely to get to me. So.
It's going to pop up. Wonderful. Well, we've come to the part of our show that I have renamed since our last interview, One for the Road. And normally it's a series of this or that questions, but I decided to do with you a series of One's Gotta Go. So I'm going to list 3 things and you tell me which one has to go. Some of these have 4. All of these have 4. I don't know what's happening, but apparently my little process decided that you can deal with 4. See, that's what happens when you have all these characters floating in your head. So the first one, laptop, notebook, voice recorder, or typewriter.
I never want to see a typewriter again in my whole life. So I couldn't believe it. I went into either Best Buy or one of those stores a year or 2 ago, and they had a whole section of typewriters.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck?
Back.
What the heck? Why? Why would we want to go back to that? Well, you figure, I mean, vinyl records are suddenly very popular. It's like, have we forgotten all of the stuff of skipping and scratching and all that nonsense from we were trying to get past that. So.
The youngins are trying to go retro.
Everybody's got to make the same mistakes all over again. Sooner or later, bell bottoms are going to be coming back too. So.
Sorry to tell you, friend, they are back. Reading, hiking, watching movies, or traveling. That's a hard one.
That is a hard one. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna have to give up hiking though. So yeah. I guess I can swim for exercise. So.
This one is a sneaky one, and I have to tell you, I did not create this list, so this is quite sneaky. Jason Bourne, James Bond, Jack Ryan, or Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, well, and, I'm feeling guilty here. The Putnam folks aren't going to like me for saying this, but I'd give up Jack Ryan. Sorry guys, but nope. Andrews and Wilson. I apologize. Yeah.
That was a hard list. Okay, and our last one: high-speed chases, espionage, plot twists, or psychological tension.
Ooh, oh boy. Whew.
That's gonna have to be none.
I was gonna say, my life would be smaller and darker if I lost any of those. I guess I could write without high speed chases.
Okay.
I'll find something else to fill in. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Brian, this has been so much fun. I look forward to talking to you again. Really, photograph has my
Absolutely.
attention. So we're going to have to get on the record for that. And listen, much success to you in all that you do. And this has been fun.
It has been. Absolutely.
And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.